For those just tuning in from both chats, we're doing an opening lesson collaboration. This is Anna Cramling right above me on my stream.
Hello.
Oh, on your stream too. Okay, so pointing up makes sense. I guess what we could start with is just some basic traps, like kind of show the initial move order. Um, I'm gonna be careful. I don't want to like overwhelm you because when you start learning Spanish, there's so many different branches at every kind of juncture in the opening. Of course, after Bishop E5, like this is initial initial starting position of Spanish. And we'll look
Awesome.
at traps from the white side and for the black side.
Yeah.
I actually had a few in mind to start off with where black is trapping white. And the
Okay.
most common move here is A6,
Hmm.
which I looked up. I think about 70 to 80% of games feature A6 if you look at like the whole like mega database.
Hmm.
Of course, there's already other options for black. There's D6, there's 97, there's G6, there's a
Hmm.
Schliemann F5 is actually an interesting and playable move. There's
Oh wow.
Berlin, of course, which is super common at like the higher levels. So
Yeah.
as a Spanish player, you kind of have to be ready for all the different responses black can play. Um, but with that said, like even if you're brand new to the opening and your opponent surprises you on move, what is this? Move three. Uh, a lot of the same principles apply. Like usually you want a castle, put the rook on e1, usually go for c3, d4. So there's general kind of themes you can play against most of what black will play.
Hmm.
But we'll start with a6. And the first line I'll share with you is the line I would share with like any beginner player who's like brand new to the Spanish.
Yeah.
And it's very possible you've seen this one before. Because a lot of newer players will think that white's just winning a pawn here, where you can take on c6 and take on e5,
Hmm.
which is not good for white. Have you seen this one before?
Yeah, I recognize this.
So this is black to move and figure out how to essentially punish white's last move.
Um, is it Queen D4?
Yeah, Queen d4 is
Yeah.
remarkably strong here, and this is a case it's justified to bring your queen out early. You're going to win back the pawn, and not only that, white will have to retreat the knight. You win back the pawn, and you take away white's castling rights. Because white will
Yeah.
either have to play king f1 or queen e2, and like black is already for choice with the bishop pair and a relatively open position. So a lot of
Yeah, it
newer
looks really
players will
bad.
walk into that. Um, Now I should mention, like after bishop c6, this is exchange variation, which it's playable. It's not super common. I'll share one more just simple trap for black. Um, let's say white doesn't take on e5, but castles kingside, most common move. The main line, and also maybe the trickiest line, is to play bishop g4, pinning the knight. There's cases where white wants to play d4, so bishop g4 prevents d4. And then most common move is h3 here. And now in this position, black has like a really tricky move, which I'm curious if if you would be able to consider. So black to move, play the trickiest move.
Okay. Maybe H5?
Yep, and I see people in your chat were saying h5 more so than people in my chat. So yeah, very nice. h5 is known as a fishing pole trap.
Yeah.
So if
I've
you're
seen
gonna,
it in other openings.
yeah, it's a very
Like
typical
the same
idea
idea.
across multiple openings, and
Yeah.
um, I guess same thing with cuisines. Like fish is just a common type of food across different types of cuisine. Um,
It is. Do
but
you like
this,
fish?
I like certain types of fish. I stay away from the more exotic. Like I don't really like octopus or the I don't know. People sometimes people eat whale or I stick with the classic like tuna and salmon. So
Okay.
or shrimp.
So no shark, no whale, nothing like that for you.
No, no dolphin.
No. No. Oh, do people eat dolphins?
I don't know. I was just naming fish that I wouldn't
Okay.
eat.
Oh
Even
no,
though
that's sad.
dolphins
I
are
love dolphins.
mammals.
Okay.
But anyway, so they call this a fishing pole because the bishop is bait and black is the one trying to go fishing. So
Yeah.
if white takes the bait, it's already very, very troublesome for white. And I was looking this up in the online database earlier, and there's been hundreds of people that have fallen into this variation where they lose instantly. Like they'll take the pawn in
Mm.
e5, and black is already mating by force, I believe, with queen h4. And this is the whole point of the trap is to open the h file, and white has no way to stop mate. I think there's been almost 1,000 games that have gone like f3, and then after g3, black
Yeah.
can black can pre-move queen h1 mate.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
goes to show that sometimes you should not accept free food by taking the bishop.
Nope. Nope. I typically advocate for always trying to like take all pawns and then just figuring out how to save your position, but sometimes that doesn't work, and this is one of those times.
Right. And this is actually a main line. Like, if you
Yeah.
look this position up in the database, like there's been a lot of grandmaster games here where black just leaves a bishop on g4, main line is d3, white will normally develop with like bishop e3, knight d2, later go for d4. And there are lines I don't want to go into because we should probably focus on more main lines, but it's a playable line that if you play against the Spanish, you should be prepared for exchange variation. Um, if you play the Spanish as white and you play exchange variation, you should be ready for this line.
Hmm.
So anyway, those were the two kind of basic traps in exchange Spanish: the fishing pole trap and that immediate like queen d4 trap. Um, I'll share one more trap for black, which is a more maybe closer to mainline. And most common move here for white is to just retreat the bishop and leave the tension. And the next trap I'll show you, I would actually recommend flipping the board, look from black side. Because this next one I learned when I was about 8 years old. My first chess coach taught this one to me. I use it with like a lot of success over the years. Um, and it starts with the move d6, which at first looks like looks like a normal move, but it also doesn't look like the most accurate move because we're walking into a pin and we're inviting the move d4 from white, which looks really strong to try and exploit the pin, maybe threatening d5. But when white plays d4, it's already beginning to walk into the trap. And have you heard of the name the Noah's Ark Trap?
I have not,
Good.
no.
Okay. Because that's the one I'm about to show you. It gets
Okay.
this name because it's like I think it's so old. And it's just a
I'm
classic
starting to
one.
love this with black. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna start playing e5 as well with black.
Yeah, I guess I'm
That was
giving
so
you
much
motivation to play against the Spanish, all these tricky traps. So the drawback of d4 is black can immediately seize initiative rather than capturing. We start with b5, just hitting the bishop, force bishop b3, and then we take on d4. I recommend taking with knight. And the most natural continuation for white is just to take back twice. So takes, takes, takes. At this point, white has already fallen into the trap. And now it's black to move and win material. And this will be a tactic for you and for chat.
C5, C4.
Yeah, c5. Okay. It's not that simple, though. You play c5, and white will play queen d5.
Um, I mean, bishop, I guess bishop e6?
Yeah, so
Am I doing
bishop e6 is one of the only moves to not get mated or lose a rook. Now let's say the queen goes into c6. The line keeps going.
bishop d7?
I'll move back. I'll
And
move
then
back and offer a draw. but you decline the draw, of course. And yeah,
Yes.
c4. So yeah, it's a cool line because black is essentially keeps initiative the whole way. At first, it looks like black's in trouble after queen d5, but we fend off the threats. And when the bishop's on d7, the rook's defended. This is the only threat, and c4 cuts off the battery. So when I was younger, I've had this a good handful of times, like playing in scholastic events and open tournaments, um, and nice way to win material early. Then there's a
Yeah.
bonus trap from this position because usually white will take twice on c4. We
Yeah.
casually develop, and then if white castles, we throw another punch with bishop e5, and we win more material.
Nice.
So anyway, that's the gist of the Noah's Ark trap. Um, Another reason why white has to be careful, kind of entering black's preparation. Now I could show you a counter to this. First of all, if you're white, and black plays d6, there's a lot of moves you can play. You don't have to play d4 immediately. I could potentially recommend c3. That way you give your bishop a retreating square and your bishop's not getting trapped. But if you go into this line, d4, so what we just saw, trade on d4, queen takes d4 is a blunder. But white can play a gambit here, c3. And if I knew my opponent is going to try and trap me with the Noah's Ark trap, I would very likely go into this line and play c3 and basically treat it as a gambit, where then black is kind of the one who might be caught off guard. And if black accepts the gambit, here there's a couple options for white. White can take back, and there's some interesting compensation. You have more development. There's still some idea with queen d5. If I was playing, let's say, a strong grandmaster, or let's say I'm playing like Magnus Carlsen in this position, and he takes on c3, there's a
Yeah.
way for white to force a draw, which I'd probably be happy to do against a strong GM. And it's using the same or similar idea from what we just saw in the other variation. So how can white just force a draw right away?
I mean, I'm thinking queen d5, queen c6, but I guess that maybe the king can go to e7 in worst case, but the
I
king is
guess,
not
yeah, I
taking
guess
e7.
forcing, the word forcing is maybe a strong word. If black chooses to go to e7, then white will have a really strong advantage, and black is taking a huge risk. Like king
Magnus
e7.
Carlsen wouldn't do that. He wouldn't go to e7.
I don't think he would do this in like a slow game. Maybe he would do this in like an online game if he wants to still play it for a win.
Yeah.
I just checked with Engine. Engine's giving almost +3 for white after it just takes on c3.
Yeah. It looks
So
so weak for black. I mean, all the light squares, d5.
knight d5, the king is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, this delayed Bong Cloud is not such a great opening here.
Not right
So
now, no.
so anyway, these are
Mm.
sometimes this will happen in different opening lines where one side can like go for a forced draw line, where if you're a much stronger player, then you have to avoid. Like if you're playing this as black, you may not want to enter this line because of c3. Then you either have to like go into the draw line or kind of just accept a worse position.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool. I like this c3 move. Okay, finally, I'm starting to like this with white too.
Cool.
C3 was a nice move.
Yeah, and like if you know who you're gonna like, if you know your opponent beforehand, you see that they're gonna play this trap against the Spanish, then maybe you can surprise them, go into it, and then
Yeah.
get them with something like this. So anyway,
Yeah, I
those are
really
kind of
like
the initial appetizers. Just like easy kind of feel good opening traps. I could maybe give you one more
I love
trap
it. Yes.
because I didn't have this one prepared initially, but a memory just came to mind. When I was about 1900, this was back in 2007, I was learning
Okay.
how to play the Spanish, and I played it for the first time. Um, I played the Spanish when I was like around 8 years old, but then I came back to it when I was around 13 or 14 years old. Um, I played it in a serious tournament, and my opponent hit me with f5, is a Schliemann, the Schliemann
Huh.
Gambit. Um, and I'm sharing this with you because it's a trap that I wish I had studied before I actually played the Spanish in a serious game. So this is
Mm-hmm.
a brand new move for me. I had no idea like how white should react to this. I will say there's a lot of acceptable moves here. White can take on c6, white can play d3, knight c3. During the game, I thought that I would try and complicate things as much as possible and try and like get my opponent out of their preparation. And then in doing so, I just walked into like the most basic trap of this opening. The move I played is d4, which actually looks kind of intuitive, very thematic when black, especially when black pushes f pawn early on. You want to just make the center open up and exploit the opponent's king.
Mm.
Unfortunately, my opponent was prepared for this. Took on e4. I only have really one logical move to take on e5. And then black still plays forcingly, takes on e5. Pawn takes e5. At first glance, this position looks completely fine for white because the king is more exposed, white's ready to castle. But this is already black to move and win material by force. There's a nice little kind of tactical idea from this position, despite black has nothing really developed.
Ooh. Um, I'm looking at like that doesn't win material. The bishop can just go back. I was looking at stuff like c6 and then like queen a5, but that
Mm.
doesn't win material. Because the bishop just goes back to e2.
Oh, you want to play queen
So
a5 to win the bishop?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like c6, bishop a4, queen a5. Oh no,
You
it
have
doesn't even win
exactly
the
the right
bishop. It's knight
idea,
c3. Okay,
but
no, no.
actually you have the right execution, but the wrong idea.
Okay.
Usually it's flipped. Like you'll have the right idea but wrong execution. You're executing perfectly. You just have to see what else is hanging for white. What's the other target in the position?
I mean, we have the pawn on e5.
Yeah, yeah. So when you play c6, you're not interested. You know, of course, you're attacking the bishop, but you're more interested in winning the pawn.
I was going for big things here. I wanted to win a
Uh,
full piece.
yeah. You wanted the dessert before you eat the appetizer.
Yeah, that's true. I was too greedy. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, after c6, white is losing material. Wherever the bishop moves,
Yeah,
queen a5. Now white will have some compensation, but there's been a lot of games here, and black will score much better because d5 is coming, and black
yeah.
develops really quickly. So
This
there
looks
is,
really good for black. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess this is one reason to play f5 is a good handful of players will play d4 and just walk into this trap. Um, Now, if you're playing the white side, you can still get away with playing d4, enter this position, and if you want to be really aggressive as white, you can willingly enter this position and play a really cool sacrifice. You just leave your bishop here and play knight c3.
Oh.
Allow them to take and then take on e4. Um, and this position is really, really sharp and double-edged and probably a bit too spicy for me. But if white's prepared here, like black is under serious pressure. So there's always more layers of kind of the opening preparation to peel
Wow.
back.
I love it. I love sacrificing.
Ooh.
I think it's because throughout my whole life I've been so afraid of sacrificing in like over the board tournaments
Hmm.
because there's been like so much at stake. But now when I play online, I just sacrifice so much because I have like all those years of like,
Mm.
caving in and not doing it. I can just like throw that when I'm playing online. And this is the type of stuff that I love. This is great.
It's fun
Wow.
to do. Yeah, especially in like Blitz and Bullet where you put your
Yeah.
opponent under pressure right away and they're the ones having to defend. This is actually my style when I play like online speed chess. But in tournament
Yeah.
chess, I usually like the more solid and positional battles. But it's nice to mix things up.
The best thing is when like you know your opening so well that you know that you can throw out traps and your opponent falls for them. It feels really, really good.
Definitely. Yeah, it's one of the things that brings me the most joy in chess is like trapping people early and then winning a
Yeah,
game without even having to think because I'm relying on
it's
things that I've studied in
great.
the past. So I'll share the next thing I want to share is actually a full game, but it's still kind of based on a trap, and it's
Okay.
against. It's also okay. So it's a game where white will win very quickly, and it's against kind of an offbeat line for black. What I'm going to show you is a game I played a few months ago online, and I actually managed to figure out the trap without studying it before. I'll explain afterwards, like how I managed to do it. But the line my opponent played was knight ge7, which is already an offbeat move. Like the main move black will usually play is knight f6, and then again, there's a lot of branches, but for now we'll focus on 97, which is maybe more trendy these days. A lot of players are playing g6 and bishop g7 and kind of getting the fianchetto on the king side. Um, Against this, I decided to mix things up. Like most Spanish players will castle, play c3, eventually go for d4. I wanted to develop as quickly as possible, so I started with knight c3. Opponent played g6. And then I played d4. So I'm wasting no time, not even spending time to castle. I want to strike in the center right away before black can get the king safe. Black took here. Now my next move is probably the first like real surprise move of the game. So it looks most logical to take. I went for knight d5. So already gambiting a pawn, like not recapturing. But knight
Hmm.
d5 has like a very nice threat to it. If black plays b5, white to move. This is more a question for chat. Let's see which chat can find it first.
Chat, figure it out.
I think your chat found it first. Good job to
Did
Yasser for
they?
president. That's an amazing username. Knight f6 checkmate. Oh, my chat is finding it now too.
Good.
Yeah, very nice, kind of early smother mates.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever been able to checkmate somebody like that over the board?
Over the board, I can't recall. Online many times.
Yeah.
Over the board, people will usually, especially in a tournament game, people will be decent enough not to fall for something like this. What about you?
I beat like I think it was like 1900. Yeah, it was like
Mm.
1900, like almost 2000, with not like a knight of 6 checkmate, but with a checkmate where my queen was on e2, the e file was
Oh,
open, and I had a knight d6 checkmate
oh.
in like move 6 or 7 or
Was it from the
something.
Caro Khan? There's a famous like trap in Caro Khan.
No, it was from the Benko, or my opponent played the
Oh.
Benko.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Banco. Okay. I think I know
Yeah.
what trap you're talking about. It's
Yeah,
another like
yeah,
common idea which can occur across like many different types of openings.
for sure. Yeah. Very nice.
And some people just have a blind spot. Like usually when especially when it's early on, you just assume the squares in your territory are defended, but
Mm,
f6 can be a very costly blind spot for black.
for sure, for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, in this game, my opponent played most normal move, bishop g7, covering f6, defending the pawn. I went for bishop g5, pinning the knight, and now I'm threatening to take this knight and then win material by taking on e7. So my opponent played a very natural move, pawn b5, hitting my bishop. I think most players here as white, especially if this were like blitz or bullet, would immediately play bishop b3. Um, but this is a very important lesson is that whenever your opponent plays a move like b5 and it looks like you have one obvious response, you don't want to play it right away. You want to always be searching for potential counterattacks. And in this position, I don't move my bishop. Turns out there's a stronger move. And I'll give this to you. I'll give this also to chat. Is white to move and find the strongest way of counterattacking?
first move that comes to mind is bishop f6, but
Mm.
I'm not sure if that is because if they take the bishop on a4, then you can take on g7, and you have this knight of 6 threat of checkmate at the same time as you're threatening the rook. So,
Oh, so you're saying I'll just make the move. So bishop f6, if we trade, we're threatening this and this. So this could be a pretty brutal mate.
yeah, so that's the first thing that comes to
Hmm.
mind, but I'm not sure if there's anything
I will say bishop f6 is definitely a candidate move,
else.
along with knight f6, of course.
Hmm.
Um, I want you to keep searching for candidate moves. I'm looking in
Yeah.
both chats. It looks like there's one person in each chat who's considered like the strongest move. I will say there's a lot of people saying knight f6, which like looks really strong because we're invading dark square. If takes takes, we get a super dominant bishop. The issue with knight f6 is king f8, and it's still a little bit unclear. Like our bishop's still attacked. h6,
Hmm.
g5 might be coming. Um, Another option a lot of people are saying is like takes on e7. But that only ends up trading like whatever it takes on e7, black will take back, and our bishop will still be hanging.
Oh, maybe. Um, maybe knight takes d4.
So knight takes d4 is a move that's played. It's the strongest move, but in order to play this move, you kind of have to see what happens next.
Yeah. So knight takes d4, and the idea was that if bishop takes d4, I wanted to take on e7.
Mm,
Uh, that was the idea. With the, I mean, like first impression was just to take with the bishop. To take with the bishop on e7, then take on d4 with the queen and threaten the rook.
gotcha. You're along the right lines. First of all,
Yeah.
there's a lot of choices black has here. If black takes a
Hmm.
bishop, then we can take on c6 and win e7.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, if black takes with a knight on d4, then we trap the queen.
Yeah.
So bishop d4 is probably like the most likely move, which is what my opponent played. And then you were saying to take on e7 and take on like takes, which looks
Oh, there's
really
a
really nice for
checkmate.
white.
There's a checkmate, isn't there?
But there's a stronger move in this position.
Yeah. Queen takes d4.
Queen takes d4 is not
No, I'm sorry.
only more aesthetic, but it's the best move too.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful oh no my queen sacrifice, because when or if black takes it, then we get a really really beautiful mate with the knight and the bishop.
Yeah.
Not quite smothered mate. I'm sure there's a name for this mating pattern, but it's a nice one. So
That's
this is what
very nice.
happened in my game. I took on d4. Uh, Opponent, of course, realized like sometimes if you can take a free queen, you have to watch out for the trap. So my opponent realized that there's a mating threat, and black castled in this position, which almost saves black. However, now it's white to move and find the force mate. It already looks really bad for black because dark squares are really, really weak. We have the queen, the knight, the bishop, all staring down.
Knight f6 check, knight e8 check, and then checkmate on g7.
Aha. So if the king moves to g7,
Oh yeah, there's the king
then
exchange.
this is pretty sweet. We put our knight in the heart of black's position and then mate on g7. So very nice invasion. However, the king can move to h8. And this is a bit more complicated. Because now if you go for knight e8, hoping to mate next move, then actually, oh no, your queen.
Oh
And that
no,
would be
your
bad.
queen.
So white has to be a bit
uh,
more accurate here.
knight g4, yeah?
Knight
Knight
g4.
g4.
And this is another queen sacrifice.
Hmm.
However, the knight is more useful on g4 because now bishop f6, king g8, knight h6 mate. So another beautiful knight bishop mate.
That's very nice. The same kind of same idea with the bishop and the knight. That's very beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing how well the bishop and knight can work together, especially like whenever you have a knight and bishop on the same color square, then you basically optimize the amount of squares they're controlling because the knight controls the light squares, bishop controls the dark squares. So they can work very, very well together if they're placed appropriately.
Yeah, especially
Yeah,
when the pawn is on g6 and the g7 square is free. There's no bishop there controlling everything.
that's true. Yeah, because black gave away the dark squared bishop,
Yeah.
it just makes it much more painful. And probably when my opponent took on d4, they were not expecting the queen to just scoop up the bishop like this.
No. Wow.
Um,
That's so nice. That whole idea.
so this whole
Because
sequence
like,
was actually, yeah, it was kind of a
yeah.
nice flow.
Was this prepared or did you find it on the spot?
So this was prepared from a completely different opening.
Huh.
And sometimes this is why it's nice to expand your opening knowledge across many different types of variations because certain ideas will carry over into other openings. And I'll try and
Yeah.
share what I mean by that. Um, so the first time I saw this sequence was from an English opening. And there's a
Oh.
game, I'll show you real quick. There's a game
Yeah.
between Andreykin and Karyakin. It was from, I think, like a World Blitz or Rapid Championship. And it went like this. Karyakin was playing black. He played, so it's completely different opening, like English, reverse closed Sicilian.
Mm.
Andreykin played d4. Karyakin took, and then knight d5. So already like a similar type of idea.
Hmm.
Bishop g7 was played. Bishop g5. Knight ge7. And here, Andreykin took on d4. And it's the same tactical flow. Even though like the bishop's here and not here, and black's pawn is back, um, the tactics are pretty much identical. Bishop takes d4 was played. Queen takes d4. Same mating idea of takes, and it's mate.
Yeah.
And
Wow, that's
then
so similar. That's
it is.
crazy.
And Karyakin castled and then just lost in. I think he resigned. He either resigned here or played it out till mate. So he lost within 12 moves. Doesn't happen too often at Super GM level.
No, that's crazy. Well, it really feels like the exact same game besides the, a6, b5, bishop a4 idea.
Just like a
But
small difference in the opening. Yeah.
yeah. Wow, that's so cool. So you could even pre-move until the very last like knight g4, bishop f6 part when you got into this. Like you had seen the whole thing, even the last checkmate basically.
Yeah, so it's weird because like in when I played the game in the Spanish, I had to think
Yeah.
in the opening, and then once I got to like the position with knight g4, I could kind of blitz out the moves, and
Yeah.
I knew what I was doing. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
Wow,
this is one of
that's
my
so
more
cool.
favorite queen sack traps from the
Huh.
Spanish. Yeah, so hopefully
I
I'm
love
giving
it.
you as like enough inspiration to add some weapons to your opening arsenal.
You are inspiring me not just to improve my openings, but just to play more fun chess. I'm
Sure,
feeling very
definitely.
inspired right now. No, to be
Good to
honest,
hear.
like this is really, really cool. These are some really cool traps. Yeah, I love seeing traps. I don't know.
Mm.
Um, they're easy to follow and they do their thing, they lead you to a really good position. So no, it's been great. I really like them. I feel very inspired.
That's great to hear. Yeah, and they're more memorable too. Like they give you more
Yeah.
motivation than just like learning the first few moves of strategy. Like sometimes if you learn a trap, you'll be more motivated to actually get it in a game. Um, let's let's go into like a more main line because what I've shown you so far, there may be more offbeat lines.
Mhm.
Um, I'll show you one of the more common variations where if you play Spanish against stronger players, it's most likely they'll follow like the main line, which
Mm.
after bishop a4, most people play knight f6, you castle. And then here there's different ways for things to branch out. Most common is bishop e7, which is known as the closed Spanish. If black takes, this is open Spanish, which is a bit less
Mhm.
common. Main line is d4. I don't really want to get into this because there's a lot of theory, and I'm not like a super specialist on it. So we'll start with bishop e7. Let's imagine. Okay, white will play rook e1, main line, defend the pawn. And when white plays rook e1, white has a threat. And sometimes people learning the move order of the Spanish will confuse themselves early on and end up losing a pawn. So most people here will play b5, which is the best move. Some more beginner players, the so-called noobs, will castle here, not realizing white had a threat with rook e1. And this is where white can actually go ahead and snag the pawn and take on c6 and then take on e5. Because there's no longer this idea queen d4, the rook's on e1 defending the e-pawn, queen d4, knight f3, and black's not winning anything back.
Because if
So,
knight takes e4 in that position, then we can just kick away the queen, or queen e2 maybe.
oh, after queen d4, knight f3, we hit the queen.
Oh, we hit the queen. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
black has no time to like take the
Yeah.
pawn. The rook defends it. So I've seen a lot of people like fall into this in the past. So most people will play b5 here. Here we retreat bishop b3, and at this point we're only scraping the surface of like the mainline Spanish, and there's so many different types of lines. Every line has their own kind of name. There's a common one. Have you heard of the Marshall Gambit?
I have, but I can't remember exactly how it goes now. But I've heard of it.
Okay, so the Marshall Gambit emerges after castling. White will play c3, the most common move, and then d5. And it's a gambit that black plays. Like d5 is the start of the Marshall Gambit. I don't want to go into this too deeply, but I want to just introduce you to it because it's something like that most Spanish players should at least know of. After takes, white can win a pawn, takes on e5, and then trade. So white just won the e5 pawn. And it looks like white has good initiative, but after, was it pawn c6? This is very, very theoretical and very common among like super GM level play, even lower level play too. And there's a lot of ways the position can branch out. But in general, black will go for a quick attack like d4, bishop d6, rook goes back, queen h4. And it's one of these lines, there's like over 20 moves of theory and like multiple branches. You really have to know what you're doing. So because of this, I usually like to avoid the Marshall Gambit entirely as white.
Yeah. That was so
And
like cool how
mhm.
like it seemed like white had initiative, but all of a sudden like 3 moves black just created this attack and started having a lot of initiative too.
Yeah, like slow motion replay, like white snags the pawn,
Yeah.
attacks the knight. The problem, sometimes this will be a problem in the Spanish or other openings where you commit to an early c3. It hinders your queenside development. So the issue for white is queenside is very slow to develop, and black gets a lot of initiative with attacking the rook, targeting the h-pawn, and the black bishops especially are very much ready to come into play. So
Yeah.
so it's playable, but maybe not the type of opening to go for as white if you don't like to defend from early on.
No. Yeah. I don't like to defend from early on,
hmm
so what
Okay,
can we
so
do to
I'll
not do that?
share a line where you can be the one
Yeah.
attacking from early on. And
Nice.
it's one of my favorite lines to play against. Usually, if I know my opponent will enter this position and they like to play the Marshall, I'll intentionally go for this position and play a move that a lot of players aren't ready for and that it has a lot of traps to it. The move is d4,
Ooh.
which I think is maybe the fourth or fifth most common move. Like other moves involve d3 or h3 or a4. which are also known as like anti-marshal lines because they avoid the marshal. But d4 is by far the most aggressive line.
Hmm.
And the very first time I discovered this move, I was actually playing the black side of this position. And I got completely destroyed within like four more moves from this point. It was some
Oh.
online game a few years ago, but I still have like the scar, like the memory still haunts me. Um, but sometimes it's good. Like when you fall into an opening trap, then you learn it, then you can
Yeah.
use the same trap against future opponents. So I
Yeah.
ended up picking up this line.
And now you're showing it as well.
And now I'm
So.
sharing it with the world, so the secret is exposed. But I remember when I encountered this as black, I thought, oh, after d4, I can get something similar to the Noah's Ark Trap, where I can take twice, we trade everything on d4, then I play c5, c4, and trap the bishop. So that was my hope. So I took on d4 the knight,
Hmm?
hoping for takes, 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 c5, and black will win a piece. Like black is already winning here.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. After I took on d4, white hit me with some really nice home cooked opening preparation. I think I'll just go
Home
ahead and
cook.
share the move here. Um,
Yeah.
the move is bishop takes f7, just kind of coming out of
Wow.
nowhere. Um, but as we start digging into the lines, we'll see the point. Of course, I take with rook. Taking with king is just black falls apart. Then my opponent took on e5. It turns out black is still okay here. What I would have had to do is play rook f8, lose back the knight. And this is double-edged. Like I guess both players still kind of have to know what they're doing. In the game, I thought it would be better for me to save the knight and then just trade on f7. So I played knight e6. And this was just an online blitz game, so I was still moving pretty quickly. I saw that after takes takes, it's some material imbalance. White has a rook and pawn for knight and bishop, which is usually like it's usually fine for the side with the extra minor pieces. However, white has one move here to just destroy black. If white doesn't have this move, then it's completely okay for black. But white's to move and win material by force.
Um, E5 maybe because you have the queen f3 check.
Yeah, e5, multi-purpose. Remove the
Yeah.
knight, open the diagonal, prepare queen f3, and black is losing something no matter what. I forget what I played here, but I lost pretty
Yeah.
quickly. Because wherever knight
Yeah.
moves, and yeah, black is dead. So it
Wow.
was a painful experience, but it was a good one to at least become aware of this bishop f7 move.
Have you played this with white? Like, so that people can see this, or is this the moment where you share this with the world?
Um, Trying to understand the question. I played this with
No.
white once. Like
Yeah.
after that game, I trapped someone with this exact line.
Yeah.
But then I studied more like branches of the line, and I discovered more possible traps as well. So it was kind of the introduction. Like this variation inspired me to investigate this d4 line further.
I just wonder if your stream has seen it before, or if this is
Oh,
like the
oh, if
first
this is the
time it's
first
like,
time. I think they
okay.
have maybe once or twice, but it was at least a year ago. I haven't shown this in a long time.
Okay.
Like usually I stick with the London opening, or
Yeah.
I like to play Ponziani too, so I don't play the Spanish too often.
Mm.
And then I think a lot of people who watch like they don't catch every stream, so this should be new to most people watching on my stream.
That's awesome. Wow, that's so cool. That's such a sneaky line. That's so beautiful, Bishop f7. Hmm.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's kind of the power of opening preparation is if you're well booked early on or even like well into the middle game, then you're prepared with um like computer ideas or computer preparation. I will say Bishop F7 is computer approved and
Mm.
I think it's like best case scenario it's equal for black.
Mm.
So I can share a few more things from this line,
Yeah.
just to try and like if there's anyone who wants to learn this thoroughly and develop a repertoire around it, I'll just share like the main branches. So there's a couple other like common moves Black can take with a d pawn, or take on d4, or play d6. If takes on d4, there's not any like immediate traps here, but white gets a pleasant position after e5, essentially chasing the knight back to e8. If knight g4, we just play h3. So knight e8 is already not what black should be desiring. And then from here, white can play c3, just gambiting the pawn to accelerate development. And even though white's down a pawn here, computer gives almost +1 for white, because black is so passive.
Yeah. Then I feel like if you're down a pawn, but still like the computer thinks you're quite a lot better, like that's when you really know you have a
That's a very
really
good
good
sign. Yeah, because
Yeah,
like
it's very good.
stockfish is usually materialistic.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it usually favors a side with more material, but
Yeah.
not in this case. So the most solid move black can play here, and it's the most common move, is pawn d6. And then the move I like to play is pawn c3. Now, I should note that there's a slightly different way to get to this position, because sometimes instead of castling, black will play d6 immediately. And then white can kind of transpose into that same variation by playing c3. Now there's no Marshall Gambit. Black's committed to d6 right away. Black will castle and then d4. So there's a couple ways to get to this line. If you play it through this move order, c3, castling, d4 is already still an offbeat move. The main line is h3, which then can branch into like maybe 10 different variations depending what black does. But a lot of people play h3 here to prevent bishop g4.
Yeah.
I like to go for this line, allowing bishop g4, but there's some kind of unique tricks and traps associated with allowing the bishop to come here. Even though white's center is under more pressure, if you know how to deal with it, it can still be pleasant.
Okay.
So I know we're diving deeper kind of into the middle game. It's not like the other traps where they come straight from the opening, but there's still a lot of richness from this position.
For sure. For sure. No, I think it's great. It also like gives a much better understanding of the whole position, I feel like.
Definitely.
So,
Yeah, especially if you see how things unfold into the middle game,
yeah.
then you'll kind of know what to expect when you're playing the opening. So white has to be careful here, because black is threatening to essentially take on f3, take on d4, potentially win material or damage white's structure on the king side. So the best move to keep everything covered is bishop e3. Defending d4, at the same time leaving e4 hanging. However, we're setting up a trap. This pawn is poisonous. If knight takes e4, white to move and punish black for being greedy.
Bishop d5?
Yeah, bishop d5, and common tactic, like sometimes the way you find tactics is just identifying which opponent pieces are not defended. So both knights are not defended. Bishop d5 attacks both. So we can say the e-pawn is defended by tactics. From here, there's a couple variations. And now we're approaching like the more high level kind of opening preparation, which this is one of my favorite lines I'm showing you. So I'll basically reveal some very high level opening preparation, reveal some lines that not too many like stronger players even are aware of.
Oh, wow.
So for part of this, you'll have to bear with me, because we'll like look into some deeper theory, but I'll still try and make it understandable.
Yep,
So
I'm
main
here.
move is pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and then black has two options. Black can play knight a5 or d5 are the main moves. debating which to show first. I'll share knight a5 first, which I think is the most common variation. Black goes for the bishop pair, but also goes for c5, like very typical Spanish idea for
Mm.
black. And the main move by far from this position, so this is still so-called like, what's the term? Theory. Like it's been played hundreds of times before. So if you're a strong chess player and you have a pretty thorough repertoire, it's likely
Yeah.
you'll have studied this position, probably studied bishop to c2. The move that I like to play here is straying away from mainline theory, and it's a very rare move, but I found some cool traps with this move. Is knight b d2, which is kind of anti-positional because we're giving away what should be like a strong bishop.
Mm.
But the point is after takes, we get some half open file. We pressure the a pawn, but then if we go a few moves further, black will usually play c5. Then white has some really interesting way of seizing initiative with h3 hitting the bishop, bishop h5 most natural, and then g4. And the way I first discovered this line was actually just using the engine. And the engine, this was like the engine's top line, and very few people had played it before. And this was like
Wow.
a few years ago. I was like preparing for an opponent who didn't end up going into it, so I just kind of saved it as kind of my secret preparation. But the point here, even though white's kind of overextending on the king side, or king is still on g1, usually you shouldn't be doing this without good reason.
Mm.
White is going to be the one like pressuring the king side more effectively. And from here, there is knight h4. And this is still opening preparation, even though we're getting kind of deep into the middle game.
Yeah.
Knight h4 is kind of a key move that makes this variation work for white. And the point is, again, we're leaving our e-pawn hanging, but it's a mistake for black to take it with either the knight or the bishop. And we'll go through both moves. So if knight takes e4, white to move and win material.
I guess knight takes g6 because then you can take the rook as well.
Yep, knight takes g6, removing the defender, and black could take on d2, but then we take on e7 with check, and then take, and we win material. And we're guaranteed to win material, whatever black does. If takes, we take the knight. So that doesn't work for black. What if bishop takes e4?
Oh yeah, because our knight is hanging as well on h4.
Our knight's a little bit vulnerable, but black's pieces are more vulnerable here.
Yeah, I feel like this is the type of position where everything feels like it's hanging. Maybe just g5.
G5, again, removal of the guard. We remove
Yeah.
the knight from guarding the bishop. And yeah, g5. Even though our king seems really exposed, like we're winning material, and black won't get much compensation for it.
Hmm.
So because the e-pawn can't effectively be taken here, on the next move we're ready to play knight f5 with some kind of nice kingside pressure, where the pawns support the knight, and even though black has a
Yeah.
bishop pair, we have more central control, more space, a lot of pressure on all areas of the board. So there's more analysis to be done from this position, but this is just kind of the at least extent of my preparation. Like it's nice to kind of blitz this out and get the opponent thinking from early on.
That's so nice. I mean, having a knight on f5 is just amazing. Wasn't it Kasparov who said that a knight on f5 is like an extra, like having an extra pawn almost in a position because it's so strong.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Kasparov quote, but I know the Ben Feingold quote is knife
Wait, what did
f5.
Feingold say?
He just says knife f5 because the knight is like a knife.
Oh.
It's stabs in different directions.
Knight f5. Not knife f5. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Knife
No, this
f5
looks
or knife
amazing.
f4. Yeah, it's a common type of attacking weapon.
Huh. No,
Um,
that looks amazing. Wow. It looks like white has so much space and just has so good pieces as well.
yeah,
So,
and like the engine will say it's approximately equal here, but it's very dynamic. There's lots of bounces, and if you want to play for a win and also surprise your opponent from early on, I think this is a nice variation to study. And if I were to play this, like if I were to prepare this specifically for an opponent, I would probably try and prepare this even deeper from here and understand like what my follow-up ideas should be if I should be playing like some h4 h5 or eventually g5 or sometimes f4 e5. A lot of different directions white can take with the kingside attack.
yeah. No, but this looks great. This is awesome. Wow.
So yeah, so this one I don't think I've shared before. Maybe I shared once before, but this one should be pretty new for most people.
I feel like
Um,
we're learning so much like inside information right now.
Yeah, and like this is, I guess, not the typical like just beginner lesson where
Yeah.
I'm sharing the basic traps. I guess we did that earlier, but this is just a glimpse to what higher level preparation can look like.
Hmm.
I'll share one more like very high level prep, which
Hmm?
it's a recent novelty that I've managed to play like once, maybe once online, once over the board, and it stems from this position.
Hmm?
So just as a refresher, let's look at the other move order. Like if black goes for a marshal, wants to play, wants to respond to c3 with d5, you remember the move I showed here for white. Like what is the most aggressive move? I'll do some memory test here.
Memory test. Okay, these are not good for me. The most aggressive move. Oh yeah, it was d4.
D4, good. Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes when you're learning a new opening, like I know for you, maybe you won't play this like 100% going forward, but always good to kind of review the moves initially, get them into memory. Okay, so
Yeah.
d4, we saw d6. White will play c3, so we transpose to this sort of variation where we allow bishop g4. Um, I didn't mention this earlier, but this is known as the Yates-Bogolugov variation. May have
I will
mispronounced
never
that.
my whole life say that word out loud.
Honestly, I didn't realize
That's
this
so-
had a name until now, so learning something new. But okay, bishop
Kazakhstan
g4.
does that.
hmm So we play bishop e3. We can say, "Oh no, my pawn," but then we have bishop d5. So black will usually take back, and we just looked at knight a5 and then knight d2.
Hmm.
Here we'll look at the other option for black, which is pawn d5, which is a bit more venomous. Because black is trying to pressure the center right away. Now we play e5. Black will play knight e4. And then from here, we can throw in h3, hit the bishop. Usually bishop h5 is played. And now we play, I think the main move is knight knight to c3, but the trickier move is knight d2. And I remember, actually, I do have a story about this one too, like how I discovered it. I was
Yeah.
playing in the 2015 Philadelphia Open. It was the last round, and I was sitting next to, I believe it was Jeffrey Zhang playing white against Andrew Tang. Um, Now this was like 6 years ago, so they were both much smaller children back then. But Jeffrey like unleashed incredible preparation from this position. And then a few years later, I had remembered like Jeffrey's amazing prep. I used his same prep against Christian Carilla at the, I think it was a 2016 or 2017 National Open. Right. I basically used a really rare variation I would not have known otherwise. Now, knight d2 on the surface looks like a blunder. because black can take, and already it looks like white is just losing material. We
Yeah.
can't take with knight. If we take with bishop, we lose a d pawn. If we take with queen, we get skewered. However, this is completely fine for white because we can take with queen, asking to get skewered, and then we just play queen c2. We lose a rook, we win the knight. I know it's kind of a mess, but engine will give already like close to +1 here for white. And that's a good sign given that we're down material. The reason being, okay, we're hitting the bishop, this pawn is going to fall.
Yeah.
I checked the games earlier, like usually black will take and then save the bishop. And after the move king h2, white has full compensation because we're going to win the pawn. We're going to get a kingside attack. Ideas f4, f5. And the extra rook for bishop for black doesn't really mean that much.
No, I mean the bishop pair as well in this
Yeah.
position.
And this bishop is completely out of play, in no shape to actually defend the king side.
No.
So bishop h6 is an idea.
Wow.
So some players will just walk into this and get into trouble like right away, going for the material.
Wow. This is so cool. That's so nice. And you remembered it just by sitting beside him, or did you like check the game after or something?
I remembered. So I was just like casually looking at the game, and then I
Yeah.
remembered that maybe a few days after, I wanted to see like if it had been played before, and there was like one GM
Mm.
level game from this variation. But what I showed you is not like the meat of the preparation, because after takes, Andrew Tang did not play bishop b4. He
Oh.
took on f3.
Hmm.
And the reason why it was so memorable is because of Jeffrey's next move was not pawn takes f3. And I remember he just blitzed out the next move, and Andrew thought for like 20 to 30 minutes.
Hmm.
So if you want, you can try and find the move here for white.
Yes.
White
Yes.
to
Yes.
move
Yes.
and find what used to be an opening novelty.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'm going to try and bring in like the first grandmaster level game that featured this variation, just to show how quickly white won.
I feel so lost.
It's
Into
a
like
really weird, confusing position, especially if you haven't seen it before. I'm looking at both chats. A lot of people saying rook c1. I think
yeah.
one person in my chat, good job to not very good player for suggesting a very good move. I'll go ahead and show it. Is queen
Okay.
c3.
Oh.
Leaving the, like, just white's temporarily down a piece and it's black to move. But the knight's attacked and the bishop's still attacked. This is kind of pure engine preparation. We're still asking to get skewered.
Yeah.
And you kind of need to spend a long time like digging into all the lines to fully understand this. But every single line, like white just emerges better. If we first address bishop b4, it's the same thing pretty much as we just saw. Could even transpose directly, which we already know is better for white. Like it's the same position. So bishop b4 is no good. If black, I think most people take on g2. Actually, what I want to show is a game. Let me see if I can bring this in as a new. Yes, I just pasted the PGN of this Grandmaster game. It was between Ponomarev playing white against Elyanov. It was from the
Okay.
Ukraine Championship in 2013, which I believe was
Yeah.
the first game to feature this queen c3 move. And the game ended in 15 moves with white just executing an amazingly beautiful kingside attack, sacrificing like multiple things of material.
Wow.
So I think we'll see how the game unfolds. First of all, white does lose a pawn because black takes on g2 and black played knight b8. But there's already like full compensation because there's
Yeah.
c-file pressure, there's g-file, bishop pair, more space in the center. So I think a lot of people, even the engine, can be materialistic because you count the pawns and you
Yeah,
favor the side who's up material, but sometimes you
for
have to
sure.
consider the other factors to know who's actually for choice in the position.
Yeah.
And white kept kind of exerting pressure, move the king over to get the rook here. F5 was played, I think, in an attempt to maybe close down the position, but white kept improving. And yeah, some gradual buildup, got the battery. Rook F7 was played. And now there is a really cool move from white. Because the last few moves have been a matter of like optimizing the position, trying to improve the pieces to their best squares. And
Hmm.
there's one piece for white not doing too much in the position is this bishop. And the bishop, even though it's aligned with black's things, it's just blocked by the pawn. So it's a lot more useful on the king side. So really nice maneuver, bishop d1,
Hmm.
looking to go to h5 and hit the rook and trying to provoke g6. And this
Hmm.
this move eventually allows white to crack through the position.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So g6 was played immediately. White still goes for bishop g5 or bishop h5 as the g pawn is pinned.
Yeah.
Bishop f8 played. Bishop f4, white's still improving. Um, and with this move, there's ideas of e6 as a resource.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so queen e8
Yeah.
was played.
E6.
Yeah, so if queen e6, which looks like a normal like blockading move, black is
Hmm.
just walking into a tactical massacre with bishop g6 and
Yeah.
then everything falling apart. Um,
Every single thing. Wow.
so usually the queen is the worst blockader because it's like the most vulnerable. Like if it gets attacked, it has to move
Hmm.
away. So queen e8, some desperate attempt to hold on, but then very stunning finish. Rook takes g6.
Wow.
I'm sure this is all calculated after
Yeah.
takes, because now this diagonal opens. The king is more naked. Bishop g7 played. Now e6. So every move is basically just a punch in the face. Rook
This must
f8.
hurt so much to play against.
Yeah, like black's. It's painful just to look from black's perspective.
Yeah.
It's like the pieces are so bad and like just completely passive. Queen's aligned with the bishop. This rook's attacked. This pawn is monstrous. Queen
Also, I think
e7
it's
played.
interesting because,
Hmm.
like in the movie 4, before Queen C5, um, White could have gone like Rook takes G7, right, and then just like gone the Queen for like a Rook and Bishop. But White's pieces are so good that they decide to not even do that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, Rook G7, it's like
Yeah.
I think what most people would do just to simplify
Yeah.
and get the material advantage, but White still has a threat and just exerts more pressure. So rather than cashing in, we will eventually cash in for more.
Yeah.
So Queen E7 and then Bishop D6, like everything attacked in the position. Queen
Oh.
H4 and final move, free Rook. We don't really care about the pawn because Rook G2 and the bishop covers diagonal, and then we're mating or just winning all the material. So this is
That's
a beautiful
crazy.
game.
And these are like two like really strong grandmasters as well.
Yeah, these are like
You're playing.
Ponomarev is a former world champion. I think at the time they were probably both top 100 in the world.
Huh.
So, and this was like this game was a lot of it was just opening preparation. Like Queen C3 was a brand new idea, and then Black was under immediate pressure
Yeah.
going into the middle game. So
Wow, that's very nice.
anyway, yeah. So maybe we'll end with that just as a nice high level game. I know we covered some more basic traps, some more high level
Yeah.
preparation. So hopefully it was a good mix, and I hope it inspires your Spanish cooking too.
It will. It will. I will be doing that very soon. No, but this was great, really. Like, it was also great that you started showing like more simple traps and like simple ideas, and then that you went from that to, you know, a bit more difficult stuff, and then like more like mainline stuff, and then showing like some games with that as examples. Because I feel like when you see games, you just, I don't know, it feels so much more natural than just trying to like memorize moves, basically.
Sure, yeah, you get more appreciation. You get to see like
Mm.
how things unfold in different stages, and try to show some different flavors too. So this
Yeah,
was
for
super fun
sure.
for me because I usually don't show, especially Spanish openings on stream. I usually like to stick with the ones that I specialize in. So I appreciate you you asking to do this.